Welcome to the lecture on Shyness My Shield, the first chapter of English, second year of BA. Shyness My Shield, written by M.K. Gandhi. In this lecture, is divided into four parts. First, introducing the author. Second, discussing some important character. Third, detailed explanation of the lesson. Fourth, some important questions. About the author. Author M.K. Gandhi, full name is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He is a great personality and great person in the world. Everybody in the world knows him. He is a renowned person in the world. He fought for the Indian independence and fought for our country. That's why you call him the father of the nation. He is well known for his different titles and names like Mahatma Gandhi, Bapuji, Gandhiji, and K. Gandhi. He was born on 2nd of October 1869 at Porbandar, Kathiawar Agency and Bombay Presidency, now southern part of Gujarat. Father is Karamchand Gandhi and mother is Putlibai and spouse is Kosturibai. He was a proponent, champion of truth and nonviolence. He followed the truth and nonviolence. He was a great orator, lawyer, politician, activist, and writer and philosopher. He is best known as a preeminent leader of the great Indian independence movement. He was active member for the independence of India and he led many movements like non-cooperation movement, Quit India movement, and Satyagraha, non-violent resistance. At last, he wants to fight for the Swaraj. He also was elected as a president of Indian National Congress 1924 to 25. Assuming the eminent leader of nation, worked hard for the eradication of poverty, expanding the rights of women, and building religious and ethnic unity and ending up the untouchability. He was shot dead and assassinated by Natharam Godse on January 30th, 1948 at the age of 78 at New Delhi. His important monuments we can see at Rajghat and Gandhi Smriti. His famous and most notable work, The Story of My Experiment with Truth. In short, My Experiment with Truth. The present lesson, Shyness My Shield, is extracted from his autobiography, The Story of My Experiment with Truth. In this lesson, Mr. Gandhi wants to say when he was in London pursuing his barrister means law as a student, he was difficulty in delivering a public speech, public communication. As he was executive member of the Vegetarian Society in London, he used to attend and participate in meeting but failed to speak because he was thinking other knows better than him and he was feeling shy. The shyness, we feel it is a negative one, but for him a positive connotation. He pointed out shyness is not a disadvantage but disadvantage for him. Shyness for him an advantage, good one, a positive one. Shyness became for him a buckler and shield. The silence for him a spiritual discernment of truth. The shyness and silence shaped his personality and spiritual life. The second part, see the important character of the lesson. There are few important character and personalities in this lesson like Mr. Oldfield, Mr. Hills, Dr. Alimshan, Sergeant Majumdar, Mr. Howard. Dr. Oldfield, his full name is Dr. Josiah Oldfield. He was a lawyer, physician, promoter of Puritanism. He was very close friend of Gandhi and Gandhi also was friend with him. They used to share with each other the difficulties and struggles or sweet and joys of every life. And he, the Mr. Old, appreciated Gandhi, saying that you speak very nicely, quietly, you speak quite right things, but why don't you speak in public or why don't you speak in meeting? Hmm. And you are like a drone looking idle, talking idle, but you're not like the BGBs. And another character we can find here, Mr. Hills. His full name is Mr. Arnold Frank Hill. He was a businessman, sportsman, philanthropist, promoter of vegetarianism. He was the first president of Vegetarian Society in London. He was also financial supporter and benefactor to the society. Was also proprietor of the Thames Iron Works Company. He was a Puritan. Puritan means he was strictly following the Bible and teaching of God and fear of God. He was really strictly following the ethical, moral values. And next person we see the Allinson. His full name is Dr. Thomas Richard Allinson. Dr. Allinson was a British physician, dietetics reformer, businessman, journalist, vegetarian activist, promoter of contraception. He was expelled from Vegetarian Society for supporting artificial method of birth control. Gandhi was supporting him because anybody can join in the Vegetarian Society. Since he was since Mr. Hill was a president, a Puritan, so it was the contraception work was against the Puritan. That is why Dr. Allinson was expelled, resigned from this vegetarian society. Next character is find Sergeant Majumdar. Sergeant means gentleman, or in Indian language it is said Siyukta. Majumdar was a friend of Gandhi. He traveled with him and worked with him for the Vegetarian Society. And also in the meeting at Ventnor, they together invited Mr. Ward for the speech on promoter of vegetarianism. And this Majumdar read Gandhi's speech at Ventnor. Next character we see Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard's full name is Mr. Howard Williams. He was English humanitarian, vegetarian activist, dietitian, writer. He is the author of Ethics of Diet, is the anthology of vegetarian thought. He was a member of Vegetarian Society. Mr. Gandhi invited him to speak on promotion of vegetarian at Ventnor, and Gandhi read his book Ethics on Diet, and Gandhi became completely vegetarian. I go to third part, detailed explanation of the lesson. The lesson is extracted from Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, The Story of My Experiment with Truth. The autobiography has 5 parts, but it is taken from the first part of 18th chapter. It was written in Gujarati, but later it is translated into English by Mahadev Desai. It is called one of the Indian classics. There are different types of literature like drama, story, novel, poetry, but this is a different type of literature like biography. You know, biography and autobiography, there are different meaning. Biography means life history of someone written by someone else. In this, always use the third person, he or she. Autobiography means life history of him or her written by himself or herself. There always use the first person. This lesson tells about the initial fear of Gandhiji to deliver public speech when he was a student in England. This anecdote gives repeated failure of Gandhi's public speech, how Gandhi made various attempts to overcome public speech. The lesson ends with Gandhiji's opinion. Gandhi's point out the silence and shyness to speak actually acted as a shield and helped him molding his personality and spiritual life. The shyness, my shade. What is shyness? Shyness means quality or state of being shy, feeling of shy. When we were students, if teacher asks question to us, if we know or if we don't know, we feel shy to answer. To stand up and tell up publicly something, we feel shy. This shyness for Gandhi became a shield and buckler. What is meaning of shield? Shield means a metal piece with handle or without handle for the protection of warrior. These warriors used to wear on chest or carry on hand for the protection. The shyness is a protection for Gandhi. Shyness we take as negative connotation, negative aspect, but Gandhi took it a different way. He took it as a positive one, an advantage one. For Gandhi, constitutional shyness is a shield and buckler, protection for spiritual growth. He took positive sense as economy of words, thinking and reflecting. Finally, he says shyness is buckler and shield. In this text, Mr. Gandhi makes 3 attempts to speak in public, but he fails. The first instant, there was a meeting summoned by Mr. Hills. The purpose of meeting is to remove Dr. Alekha from the Vegetarian Society. Mr. Hill was a president of Vegetarian Society, a Puritan. Gandhi also was a executive member of Vegetarian Society, and Dr. Alekha was a famous member of the Vegetarian Society. But Alekha was promoter of contraception, artificial method of birth control, which was against the Puritan. That is why Mr. Hill wants to remove him. And there was silent vote, and at last Gandhi lost and Dr. Alekha lost, and and Dr. Alekha resigned from the Vegetarian Society. And there was a second instant and second attempt Mr. Gandhi made. He prepared a speech on promotion of vegetarianism by writing because extempore was difficult for him. Spontaneous speech or spontaneous public speech was difficult for him, so he wrote down. So when he presented or when he delivered his speech at meeting at Ventnor, he was unable. It was difficult for him to deliver a public speech. He stood up to read but could not. His vision became blurred. He was trembled and shivered. He could not speak. At last, Sergeant Mojumdar read out his speech. The third instance was made at Holborn restaurant in England. This restaurant was a vegetarian restaurant, so all the members of the Vegetarian Society was invited for this meeting. It was on the eve of departure to home, Gandhiji to come home in return India. He prepared a meeting and called in this Holborn vegetarian restaurant. In this, Gandhi prepared a humorous speech to deliver on this departure dinner. But what happened? He tried first sentence but could not. His memory failed, entirely failed. His mind became blank, could not speak anything, At last, he felt ridiculous and abruptly, suddenly, he said, I thank you, gentlemen, for having kindly responded to my invitation. And he sat down. In this meeting, he made himself ridiculous. He felt shy and shame on this last departure meeting in London. At last, in South Africa, he overcame the shyness, but not completely. The constitutional shyness for him not a disadvantage, but he took it differently, and he took it different thinking as a positive one, an advantage one, taught him to become a economy of word, became a habit of thinking and reflecting in his life. It helped him limiting his thoughts. He never regrets anything after speaking or writing because he was following the proverb, think twice before you speak. For him, speech is a silver, silence is gold. He never uttered or wrote impromptu. A man of few words will rarely be thoughtless in his speech. For him, silence is the part of spiritual discipline. Silence is not a weakness, a part of spiritual discipline. Anyone who speaks too much or talking too much wastes time and energy. He admits that shyness was once a annoyance, but later it became pleasure to him. For his shyness really became shield and buckler. It has allowed him to grow, helped him to discern the truth. In his own word, my shyness has become, in reality, my shield and buckler. Really, the shyness and silence helped him to grow his personality and develop his spiritual life. Now, some important questions like who is the author? Who is Mr. Hills? Who is Dr. Alinson? Where did Gandhi overcome his shyness? What is an idle talk? What is silence for Gandhi? Some of the vocabulary like extempore, impromptu, we need to learn. So thank you very much to everyone who watches it.